So I'm assuming what you mean is what is my process to writing a book and actually doing it rather than the technical process. And you know what? We got time for both. So what I'm going to do through this video is I'm going to explain to you my process and how I've sort of grown best practices I've learned to adopt as I've written more and more books. Then I'll quickly let you know the technical side of it, what sites you should use, where you should publish, how you should publish. And then I'll explain to you the different methods, such as being a pantser or a plotter, and a mixture in between, which is what I currently am. Then, throughout the course of this video, we'll mash that all together, and I'll outline my next book. I'm going to take a break from my main series and just write a standalone book. And you, the audience, after I do this, can help me brainstorm. And I'll include chapter-to-chapter updates on my Buy Me a Coffee blog. Link in profile, or if you're on YouTube, it's in the About section. Or you can just use this link. Okay, so let's get into the video. So typically what I did in the beginning was I just sort of went with it, and I pantsed it, is what it's called, and wrote it out of thin air with no real guide or anything. That's a mistake. Don't get me wrong, it's perfectly fine to be a pantser if that's what works best for you. But you need some sort of outline, and honestly, the more detailed the better, because it's pretty hard to have writer's block if you know where the story's going. That being said, you don't want to be too rigid and prevent yourself from getting anything unique that comes along while you're writing. You have to have somewhat of a flexibility in being willing to let whole scenes go. Maybe as you're writing, the characters develop a sort of romantic relationship or connection that you weren't planning on initially. But that's just, you figure it out over time and get better and better as you write. If you want to publish your first-time author, I suggest using KDP, using the Kindle Unlimited program, and being exclusive to Amazon for the first 90 days. You can always opt out of Kindle Unlimited after that, but it gives a good chunk of marketing done for you through Kindle. You can run book price promotions for your ebook or your paperback. Once you get more into it, you can go to sites such as Kobo, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and you don't necessarily have to use KDP in the long run. If you don't use Amazon, you'll have to get your own ISBN, which in Canada is free. If you're in the United States, I don't think it's all that expensive. But if you want to go for traditionally, now Amazon does now have a hardback option, but Ingram Spark. There are other sites you could use too, but for ease of access, Ingram Spark and Amazon are the big players in the game. But again, if you're a first-time author, I suggest just dipping your toes in the water and seeing how the industry works. Stick with Amazon because it's easy. You just have to click. You don't have to put any money out for an ISBN, etc. Now, to actually write the book, you can use Google Docs, Microsoft Office Online, which is free, or Microsoft Office if you have it, Scrivener, Kindle Create, or Google Docs. It's up to you. Now, personally, what I like to do is to just use Kindle Create for the Amazon Marketplace because it's just so much easier. That way I can write the book, get it out there, and then I'll do all that stuff after it's published. But again, you have to decide what's best for you and what workload you can take on. I try to minimize the things that I have to do all at once. All right, we got my Bible-ish notebook and a quill with ink. Quill, you join me? Did you get it? Okay, now this is where it's up to you, whatever way you want to do it. What I like to do is have the cover first and then write a story around that. Me being highly visual. So what I do is I take a cover, something I like the looks of, think of a story, and make notes around that. So we'll use my book cover that I already have. Because for my main series, I can always just get another book cover made. It's no biggie. I was kind of not liking it anyway. Which is another important lesson. Plan ahead. Because when you write a series from a book that was pantsed, you get all over the place and things change. So we're going to use this book cover, Forever Mortal, which gives off a very zombie-ish, dystopian sort of aesthetic, I guess. So, this is my process and how I will go about writing a book based off this cover. So, the first part is, what other sources of media do we want to draw inspiration from? So, the inspiration for the main plot will basically be the outbreak from Last of Us, Ghost Wars, where ghosts kill the living, or the Persistence, where cloning causes mutations. Now, because I can't ask you guys in real time, I'm going to choose the Ghost Wars inspiration. So next, we're going to want to figure out the main plot, the subplot, and the main characters. And don't worry about all this empty space. I'll fill it out as I write and add other notes. I don't waste any paper. So here's the main plot. A meteorite crashes to Earth, knocking out communication worldwide, causing anarchy amongst the population. Humanity is terrified to find out that everyone that has died since the incident took place comes back as ghosts, and they want revenge. Okay, so now we want the subplot, which in a lot of books or other mediums will typically be a romantic interest, but ain't nobody got time for that. Not when the world's ending. I'm kidding, I just don't like to write it. So what we're going to do is these two are going to be brother and sister. And the subplot will be the brother just happened to almost die when this meteorite strike happened. So parts of him are infected and turning into a ghost. And it slowly progresses and gets worse and worse throughout the story. Trying to think, what should his name be? We'll just call him Margaret for now. So there we have the subplot, Margaret slowly turning into ghost. Now your book can and should have multiple subplots. Don't overdo it, but there should be more than, you'll figure it out as you write. For the purposes of this video, we're going to keep it simple. Okay, now for the last point, I have to come up with the main characters, which are going to be obviously the two people on the cover, which will be the protagonists of the story. And then, obviously, those creatures, which, to keep things simple, are just ghosts. Okay, so we have our main characters, which is the ghosts, obviously the dead people. Tan, a Native American girl name, meaning new moon. And Dakota, a North American boy name, meaning friend. Okay, now, obviously, because I'm using Native American main characters, I'm going to need to have sensitivity readers and arc readers that are familiar with Indigenous people, their culture and everything else, so that I don't be offensive. I'll have to give those names credits to their tribe of origin, etc. Okay, next we're going to want to decide the main characters' relationships. Tayan and Dakota. Okay, so the MC's relationship to each other. Tayan and Dakota grew up together after their parents died, and they were adopted by a Mohawk family. They were both off in college studying horticulture when the meteorite strikes. So, now we do chapter 1. So if you remember from earlier, Dakota has that thing happening to him being half ghost. There is also, obviously, the meteorite strike. So in chapter 1, there's going to be a meteorite strike, and Dakota's almost going to die. And let's just say for good measure that this all happens during exam week. So, chapter 2 is worldwide silence because of the meteorite strike and widespread panic because all the communications being down. Internet, banking systems, everything is shut down. But also, Dakota's saved. So personally, I like to let that be as far as I sort of go. I'm going to do chapter 3, but it's going to be vague. So chapter 3 is just survival. And we'll figure out what that means as we write. Once we get those first 2 chapters written, I'll revise them, perfect them, fill them out, and then I'll outline the upcoming chapters. And it'll get easier and easier. You can do more and more as you get further into the story. Now, some people like to plan much further than that, but that's no fun. I do like some element of pantsing. Now, there's a lot more that has to go into a book, but I'm running out of time, so, you're going to have to do it on your own. Your character's reason for being, why they are the way they are, their motivating factor, if you will, and how and why the story decides to centralize around these characters. But yeah, that's how I write a book. Make sure you follow my Buy Me a Coffee.